Oh, there's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and to another book haul. I'm filming this in mid-February 2021, but these are still mostly books that I bought last year because I didn't have anything else to spend my money on for all those months. Here is a Canadian novel that I waited and waited before it was easily available to me here in Japan, and it finally became so, and I picked it up. Small Game Hunting at the Local Coward Gun Club. Best title and cover ever, don't you think? By Gail Coles. This is kind of like a Me Too type of novel, is how I've heard it described. So I expect it to be a really challenging read, a dark, taut, funny novel. It was nominated for a bunch of awards when it came out a couple years ago, 2019. It's got a really almost frustratingly coy synopsis in the back, but it appears to be set in a restaurant involving staff and customers. Dense, dark, and propulsive. I like to read opening sentences or paragraphs when they have some kind of a standalone quality, and this one does, so here we go. Olive waits below the sad mural painted in memory of some long-ago drowned boy. She can see up and down Duckworth Street from her perch, though there's not much to see this early in the morning. A scattered taxi slogs by, carrying fiendish-looking passengers who attempt to discreetly smoke from barely cracked windows. Discretion is a skill they have fallen out with, but they don't know that yet. They still fancy themselves stealth, piling 4 park-applied humans into a single toilet stall, scarves dangling beneath the door, telling tales on them all. I didn't really understand that part about the single toilet stall, but it sounds intriguing, if not maybe a tad overwritten. I don't want to be too hasty, but I still plan to give this one a try. I have this gorgeous edition of James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room in the Everyman's Library hardcover edition. I got it after I finished reading the Polish novel Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jadrowski, in which this novel, Giovanni's Room, plays a very central part. And I read Giovanni's Room when the summer that I lived and worked in London when I was about 22, and I remember thinking it was good, but don't remember anything else about it, and I've heard such mixed reviews of it ever since. But I expect that I'm going to love it because it's James Baldwin. Opening paragraph. I stand at the window of this great house in the south of France as night falls, the night which is leading me to the most terrible morning of my life. I have a drink in my hand, there is a bottle at my elbow. I watch my reflection in the darkening gleam of the window pane. My reflection is tall, perhaps rather like an arrow. My blonde hair gleams. My face is like a face you have seen many times. My ancestors conquered a continent, pushing across death-laden plains, until they came to an ocean which faced away from Europe into a darker past. This is a non-fiction book about Indigenous issues in Canada, called Indigenous Rights. Subtitle, A Guide to First Nations, Métis and Inuit Issues in Canada, by Chelsea Vowel. And it is kind of like an encyclopedia. Kind of like a textbook, but apparently very reader accessible. I've heard good things about it. And as many of you know, most of the nonfiction reading that I plan to do for the foreseeable future is on Indigenous issues. And this is probably a very good one to read early in that project. I'm going to be doing this as a buddy read with Heidi of My Reading Life at some point this year. The next two are Blame It on Roz of Scally-Danding About the Books. The first one, I think it was something she said on her channel, or maybe it was a book that she and her daughter discussed in their drama dialogues series. Brian Friel's play Translations. I studied this play as an undergrad, and I remember it made a big impression on me at the time. What are we talking here? Late 80s or something? Don't remember much about it, but I remember thinking then and thinking back many times since about how analogous some of the things going on in here about English colonialism in Ireland could apply to colonialism in Canada against the Indigenous peoples. This is set in 1833, and it's about the map making and the renaming of places in Ireland to be more British-sounding place names. That's all I remember about it, and that's why I want to reread it. Also, blame it on Roz. She reviewed this book, The Cost of Sugar by Cynthia McLeod, and this is an African novel set in 18th century Suriname by Cynthia McLeod. And Cynthia McLeod sounds like a very, very white person, but she is not. She is Surinamese. I don't know the story of why her name is so white-sounding, but she very much is a ethnically Surinamese author, and Roz quite enjoyed this novel, so I bought it. Set during the Dutch colonial period, like I say, 18th century. The story apparently is told through the eyes of two Jewish stepsisters. This was originally published in 1987 and reissued 2013. The heading of the first chapter is The Hebron Plantation, and there is a reference here to a dish or something being cooked that I don't know what it is or how to pronounce it, but I will do my best. Dawn is breaking on the Hebron plantation, and while the eastern sky is blushing at the caress of the rising sun, the doors of the slave huts begin to open one by one, and small fires can be seen under their lean-to shelters. Feya Watra is being made, hot water into which a shoot of molasses is stirred. Here and there an appetizing scent arises from a cooking pot, signaling the presence of an aniseed leaf or some herbs in the water. Now that's a very plain introductory paragraph, but I just think the writing is beautiful. The Cost of Sugar by Cynthia McLeod. This is a book that I found out about. It was, I think, a new release last year. A nonfiction book about white supremacy, racism, and monuments. So, a really hot topic in America, but also in Canada. We've had our own slightly more boring version of that with various statues of the father of Canada, the first prime minister, who was a racist asshole extraordinaire, and recently anti-racist activists have been pulling down statues of him all over the country, which I have applauded, and if I was there, I would be right in there, tugging on the rope. So this one is Down Along with the Devil's Bones, A Reckoning with Monuments, Memory, and the Legacy of White Supremacy by Connor Towne O'Neill. The title says what it's about. He is an NPR producer, and he's not terribly hard on the eyes. I think you know me well enough, and I don't really attract idiots, so there's nobody that's going to say, oh, you're trying to change history, like if I get a comment like that in the comment section. But no, I don't have any idiots watching me, do I? Here is a 2020 novel out of Canada that I found out about from Lindy. I think it was on the Giller Prize. That's how she and I ended up talking about it, and it sounded like a Sean book, so I ordered it, and here it is. Watching You, Watching Me, a novel by Lynn Cody. Set in Nova Scotia, a woman comes home after 10 years because her mother's died, and her developmentally disabled older sister needs care. So that's the premise, and boy, if it's treated with appropriate literariness, and with characters that I can root for, it sounds... couldn't be shawnier of a book. Alicia Elliott is a Mohawk writer that lives in Canada, and she writes a lot of nonfiction, especially essays, and this book is very famous, and I finally have a copy, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground, which is just the most fabulous title for any kind of a book. And these are essays, some of them autobiographical, others not. Alicia Elliott was quite unhappy the way her book was marketed in the US as memoir, and she says, no, they are essays, goddammit. Some of them touch on my personal experience, others don't, for God's sakes. So I definitely will be reading it as essays when I get to it, and they are all about Indigenous issues, Indigenous resistance and politics, colonial trauma, addiction, and so on. And I expect this to be a very challenging read as well. What the hell, I'm going to read the extended opening from the title essay, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground. He took his glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose, the way men in movies do whenever they encounter a particularly vexing woman. I'm really confused. You need to give me something here. What's making you depressed? His reaction made me think briefly of residential schools, the state-mandated church-run boarding schools Indigenous kids were sent to kill the Indian and save the man. At the time, I couldn't understand the connection between the two. Maybe it was the fact that he operated his therapy sessions out of a church. That certainly didn't help. I wasn't sure what to say. Can a metaphor or simile capture depression? It was definitely heavy, but could I really compare it to a weight? Weight in and of itself is not devastating. Depression is. At times it made me short of breath, and at times it had the potential to be deadly. But was it really like drowning? At least with drowning, others could see the flailing limbs and splashing water, and know you needed help. Depression could slip in entirely unnoticed and dress itself up as normalcy, so when it finally took hold, others would be so surprised they wouldn't know how to pull you to safety. They'd stand there staring, good-intentioned but helpless. Empathetic, perhaps, but mute. Or, as in the case of this particularly unqualified therapist, angry and accusing. Not that I necessarily blame them. I've done the same thing. This is a book that I need to read sooner rather than later. Next, I have this Nigerian novel, Stay With Me, by Ayobami Adebayo, published about 3 or 4 years ago, I believe, 2017. In fact, I tried this novel on audio. I can't remember if it was just after I came to BookTube or just before, but around the same year. And I was engaged by the story, but ultimately, and I went far into the audiobook, like more than 30%, maybe 40%, maybe close to 50%, before I concluded that the audio narrator was ruining the experience for me and was adding nuances through her voice, through her tone of voice, that I didn't think would necessarily be there if I was reading it. And that's one of the very few times that's happened where I felt like I just couldn't trust the narrator, the audiobook narrator, to lead me through the story. I was kind of disagreeing with the nuances she was adding to it. So I stopped and just waited. I probably still will wait another year or two until I've forgotten her voice. Literally, the audiobook narrator's voice, and then I will read it, because it did have a lot of stuff in it that I was really connecting with, but not the way she was reading it to me. It is about a woman whose husband takes a second wife because she has not produced an heir, has not produced a child, and all of that. And it shows the way that cultural mores in Nigeria were starting to change, and so she was horrified, but if I'm remembering correctly, her own parents thought it was a good idea. Like, there was just a lot of conflict between the old ways of doing things and the new ways of, new morality that made it really fascinating. But I'm going to try it again, freshly, as a printed text. Next, I have a couple of novels from Denmark that were gifts to me. And I have been asked not to say any more about that regarding the gift giver. The first one is As Trains Pass By. I believe the original title in Danish was Katinka by Herman Bang. Translated from the Danish by Glyn Jones. And Herman Bang was a gay writer in Denmark a long time ago. He died in 1912 and he was about 50 or 60. Came from an aristocratic Danish family and had been quite ostracized within society because of his homosexuality. So the main character here is Katinka, and she is a station master's wife in a sleepy Danish provincial town. And as a companion book, a gift to go with that is this novel, Bang, which is about that writer, Herman Bang, by Dorrit Willumsen, translated from the Danish by Marina Alamano. And so this is a more modern novel, and the opening premise is that in 1912, which is the year he died, he was found unconscious in a train compartment in Ogden, Utah. He was on his way around the world for a reading tour. I don't know if that premise, him being found unconscious in a train car, is autobiographical or fictional, but that is the premise of the novel. Well, I should find out. Let's have a quick look at the translator's preface. I didn't do a deep dive looking through the introduction and so on, but it appears that I don't know whether he was found unconscious on a train, but I think probably the world tour part is biographically true, and that he was evading the homophobic stuff in his homeland by doing a reading tour around the world. So yeah, I'm really intrigued about this one too. So thanks, mystery friend. I mean, I know who you are, but I'm going to thank you publicly, even if you haven't given me permission to name you. Next up is a novel from Sweden, fairly recent, The Family Clause by Jonas. You know, I don't like it when the script of the author's name is so curly-cued or whatever that I can't really read it. Jonas Hassen Khemiri, translated from the Swedish by Alice Menzies. So Khemiri is a Swedish writer, born to a Tunisian father and a Swedish mother. Born in Sweden, so he's a Swedish writer. Published in English in 2020. When I read the synopsis on the inside flap, it could be boiled down to one sentence. It's a book about a family. So that's good enough for me. Let's have a listen to the opening paragraph. A grandfather who is a father is back in the country he never left. He is standing in the queue for border control. If the officer behind the glass asks any suspicious questions, the father, who is a grandfather, will keep calm. He won't call the officer a pig. He won't ask whether the officer bought their uniform from a mail order catalog. Instead, he'll smile and hold up his passport and remind the officer that he is a citizen of this country and that he has never been away for longer than 6 months. Why? Because his family lives here. His beloved children, his fantastic grandchildren, his deceitful ex-wife. He would never go away for more than 6 months. 6 months is the max. He generally goes away for 5 months and 30 days. Sometimes 5 months and 27 days. Well, that is quite a hook. And another British royalty biography. This is Empress Alexandra, but it's not a full-length biography. It's kind of a mini biography focusing. This is Empress Alexandra, not the British Queen Alexandra, but the Russian Empress Alexandra. This is Nicholas and Alexandra, the last Tsarina of Russia, who was Queen Victoria's granddaughter, and it is about their relationship. So the subtitle is The Special Relationship Between Russia's Last Tsarina and Queen Victoria by Melanie Clegg. I didn't have any specific, precise interest in the Empress Alexandra, but it was really cheap online, so I bought it, and that's what it's about. So that is yet another book haul. Thanks for watching.